Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to every one of you joining us here today. It is our pleasure to have you for this webinar. My name is Lisa Maina. I will be moderating this session today, so you'll be with me for the next 1.5 hours. I work with the United Nations Institute for Training and Research, UNITAR, and I'm based in Bonn, Germany, and I'm happy to moderate this session. So a bit of introduction of what this session is about and a bit of maybe overview. So as part of the Climate Engagement Program for Postal Sector Stakeholders, the Universal Postal Union, UPU, and UNITAR are organizing a series of global webinars throughout 2025 and 2026. So these sessions aim to provide a platform for postal entities, technology providers, policymakers, and regulators to gain expert insights and exchange best practices, but also to explore practical solutions to some of the key technical and operational challenges in the postal sector's sustainability journey. So we have many actors that are shaping the operational environment of the postal sector towards sustainability. On the public policy side, countries set sustainable development goal targets, and they submit nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, which are translated into national action plans for climate action. Even though the term postal is not always mentioned explicitly in these processes, national efforts on sustainable transport, cities, and communities directly impact postal operations. So we saw this connection very clearly in our first UPU UNITAR webinar earlier in the year that had a focus on the EV grid integration and the role of postal fleets in national clean energy strategies. But another source of influence comes from the market. So globally, about 75% of small parcels are delivered through the postal network. And at the same time, an increasing share of postal revenue now comes from parcel delivery. Many designated operators are placing integration with the e-commerce ecosystem at the center of their corporate strategies. And this brings us to today's topic, which we're going to be discussing on the sustainability requirements emerging in the e-commerce market and their implications for the core business of postal operators. And to help us unpack this topic more, we're very fortunate to be joined by 3 expert speakers who will each bring in a different perspective on this topic. And perhaps in the next slide, you'll be able to see an overview of the agenda and how the flow of today will go. We will have a first presentation by our first expert, Ms. Yashuan Chen from the UPU, who will kick us off with data-driven insights on the sustainability requirements shaping the e-commerce ecosystem, drawing from S&P Global's ESG datasets. We will then have a second presentation from Dr. Janya Chanchai-Chujit, who is the Associate Professor at the Center of Sustainable Logistics and Supply Chain Management at Prince of Songkhla University in Thailand, and she'll provide insights from the logistics and delivery provider perspective. We will also have a final presentation from Ms. Betul Yilmaz from Turkey's Information and Communication Technologies Authority, BTK, and she'll offer reflections from a regulatory point of view, including how governments can support transparency and alignment with broader policy goals. So we have quite an interesting, engaging session ahead. And within each of these presentations, we will have some few minutes for 1 or 2 questions. We encourage you to please put these questions in the chat in between the presentation if they pop up in mind, and we will try to address them in between the presentation. But after the 3 presentations, we'll also have an open Q&A where you'll be able to reflect further and hear further from the experts. And then we'll have a final takeaway and closing session. Right, so before handing over to our first speaker, I'd like to invite all of you for a quick warm-up poll just to get us started. You'll be able to see it on your screen now. Thank you, Lucas, for that. We want to hear from you as much as we'll be learning from the experts. We also want to learn from you. You'll see the question there. Please do take a bit of time to share your thoughts. Okay, I think then we can close that poll. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. So just a bit of what we can see here. We can see 79% of you, so 19 out of 24. Your perception is that it is a strategic opportunity for growth and modernization. That's really positive. A small majority of you also think that it's a necessary compliance task. And some are also not sure, which is totally fine. And we hope there'll be some clarity for you at the end of this session. So with that being said, I'll hand the floor over to our first expert, Ms. Yashuan Chen, to take us through her presentation. Over to you, Yashuan.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for the opening. And also let me share my screen very quickly. Please do let me know whether you see it clearly.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. And also thank you for organizing the poll before this presentation. Indeed, it's very interesting to see our sector players' thoughts. Then let's dive into some insights drawing from the ecosystem of e-commerce and including corporate, environmental, social, and governance data. And the poll question actually asks is, how do you perceive it? Indeed, when we look at the current and a lot of postal strategies, there are many things shows that the sustainability requirements of e-commerce market matters a lot to our sector. One operator sets modernization goals, or maybe also ambition to become an e-commerce platform. And what is your performance with the expectation in the e-commerce ecosystem of going sustainable? And potentially it will also matters, since if you are part of this ecosystem, then you will be either the platform or be part of the supply chain. That gives you double the exposure relating to going sustainable. And the last part is, should there be slow in the progress, there is a chance to risk of being locked out from the high growth partnership. Maybe this source in terms of why it matters will continue to evolve, but let's look into further details in terms of factors around e-commerce ecosystem for going sustainable. If we just look at the science part, knowing that, of course, ESG contains dimensions beyond environment. But for this slide, the first two slides here, I will just first give you a sort of like a hint and understanding from an environmental hotspot perspective of e-commerce. Then you will see that basically, for example, in the emission context, Scope 3 transport and distribution accounts for 30% of total GHG emission. And that also would be higher in case the return and reverse logistics will be added in. Another hotspot, if we consider, would actually be relating to material consumption, pollution, and waste, particularly such as packaging related e-commerce context. When you look at the figures, actually 1.7 million kilogram has already been generated in terms of plastic packaging waste in 2022, and it is projected to double in 5 years. So when you look at all packaging utilizations, then they are always closely related to parcel operations in terms of different material breakdown. So if you are an e-commerce platform and you would know your suppliers will be a key part of your metrics of going sustainable, then the question is, why do e-commerce platforms want to address those hotspots, and how would this affect postal sector? In operational environment of e-commerce, there are many incentives. They are consumer demand, for example, for sustainable products and services, especially if we consider younger generations' behavior model. This is also supported by capital market drivers that are investing in ESG assets and also are facing requirements coming from their shareholders. Accompanied is the regulatory requirements and incentives as well. And on top of the environmental goal, I want to emphasize a little point here is when you look at the substantive requirements coming from regulatory context, it could also be connected with industrial policies, such as promoting the domestic manufacturing capacity, like clean transport area. And then moving further, for e-commerce platform in itself, it's also important to work on resource efficiency, cost reduction, and addressing physical and transitional, including strategic related risk in this context. Therefore, there are multiple elements and drivers for e-commerce platforms to go sustainable. And then let's look at some factors closely. And this graph illustrate the ESG policy environment, covers at least 90 jurisdictions. And in terms of the, it can be observed that the governments are adopting ESG policies requirements that imposing on the companies to disclose their sustainability progress. The measures taken by country has a large spectrum, from just the individual initiatives to give clear requirements on the content, scope, and the methodology of disclosure, with active enforcement, such as a financial penalty of non-compliance. It has to emphasize that this map is just like a heat map, meaning that the policy environment evolves very fast in the past few years. For instance, I listed here at the initiative level in terms of Kenya's Green Bond Program. That program actually started in 2017, but now starting from 2021, Kenya has already entered into the major scope in terms of requiring mandatory disclosure for companies, publicly listed companies. So this is to emphasize, right, very often this kind of involvement will be changed very fast, and building on accumulation of policy learning in the past few years, and we will see more and more measures and policy environment moving towards a stronger requirements at the global level. Very often, those disclosure framework are aligned with different global reporting initiatives and standards. And very often, in terms when you think about the size, scale, and the reach of e-commerce platform and the revenue level, their public trading status, many would actually be captured by the ESG disclosure requirements in many jurisdictions. On top of those disclosure requirements, there are also regulatory environment that moving on operational requirements. I'm listing here for categories, which there are more, but for categories particularly relevant to the parcel and transport operations of e-commerce, and as well as for their suppliers, meaning on the packaging part, on the extended producer responsibility part, relating to especially, again, packaging, but different regulatory logics here, as well as relating to supply chain due diligence requirements and also clean transport adoption requirements. Sometimes those measures are taking place in particular, for example, performance requirements such as recyclable rate, such as or procedure requirements such as registration, or it can take place in the context of giving particular incentives. And having said that, this gives us a roughly idea how the policy environment for the e-commerce platform go sustainable generally look like. But when we think about in parallel to regulatory environment, it is also the capital market drives for e-commerce market to go sustainable. Here I highlight a few elements here. For example, in terms of the ESG asset, by 2022, that time has already reached to a peak to 30 trillion US dollar, and is predicted to hit 40 trillion by 2030. We also see behaviors such as shareholder activism. And in that context, for example, Amazon plastic resolution in its annual meeting by shareholders reached 49% of support from Amazon shareholders. And another interesting development is really relating to connecting the ESG performance with investment. Their ESG rating agencies such as S&P Global actually plays an important role, and such a rating actually has a strong connection with, for example, investment based on certain ESG-related index. Meanwhile, we also see those publicly traded companies having started to take business commitment relating to public business commitment relating to net zero target, renewable energy use, sustainable packaging. You could imagine how this commitment needs to be enforced in their own ecosystem, including their relationship with the suppliers. And you have perhaps already seen a lot of investment related decisions coming up from those companies. There are ones that are relating to, for example, I give an example that Microlibro funded 3,600 EVs through green bonds in LAC region. This is on top of innovation in sustainable finance instruments. So now another question is really having looked at the regulatory drivers, looking at the capital, zooming into the capital market drivers as well, and not even mention the other parts that we have already covered in the first slide. And the question is, what does those drivers for e-commerce platform go sustainable really mean for the postal sector? Meaning that the regulatory obligations will be passed on to supplier network. And in terms of disclosure requirements and data sharing, indeed will taking place, such as building on the disclosure requirement that entails actually certain level of data sharing collaboration. That means the capacity to manage your ESG data will be a de facto market access requirement to meet up with those expectations. There are also, of course, a need to upgrade your infrastructure, such as investing in clean technology and digital reporting systems. Now we dive into further to look at inside of the e-commerce sector and think about how those entities are coping with the drivers and how they engage with the suppliers in more detail. Drawing from data insights from Standard & Poor's global ESG data, this data set, the S&P Global ESG data covers over 13,000 publicly traded enterprises. The data collected from disclosure, media, stakeholder analysis, and modeling process. And the score range from 1 to 100. I would not go through the details in terms of methodology, but would like to emphasize it is a basis. Again, is the basis that form the several ESG investment index. Does those data and scores have direct financial impact? For our meeting purpose, with the support of S&P Global colleagues, we narrowed down to 209 publicly listed e-commerce entities across the globe. And we look at their performance in the ESG and then understand how do they interact with their suppliers. When we look at this, the regional performance, we actually know, for example, from the publicly traded and e-commerce entities, the trend on the regional level, it is we have seen that those are leading coming from Africa and the European region, followed by Americas and Asian Pacific regions. Happy to answer questions later on relating to the ESG score, but we can also look into the individual score itself. The 2024 score are publicly available. And I just use a few well-known brands and use the public available score to give an idea how those entities are performed in terms of their ESG status. And from also the dashboard itself, you could also see the scoring criteria and performance that actually matters the most to the e-commerce platform. That includes, for example, customer relationships, includes, for example, labor practice, human capital management, human rights, climate strategy, packaging, risk and crisis management, supply chain management, waste and pollution control, different measures in this context. Then after we look at the elements that contributes to different level of ESG score performance, maybe we can just look at the two particularly relevant to the e-commerce and the e-commerce and postal relationship. If we look at the entities that in the analysis, actually 53% of the entities publish indirect GHG greenhouse gas emission data information. This actually implies that if you are publishing indirect GHG information, that means those e-commerce platforms would potentially ask for data collaboration from the suppliers. And of course, currently, majority of those data provision are done through modeling, but we can reasonably expect in the future scenario that the real data supplier coming from suppliers in terms of collaboration and data collection will take in place more. And another like performance and criteria, which is going to be very relevant to the e-commerce operating environment, is actually when we look at it, it's also high to 44, like close to 50% of entities are taking measures for sustainable packaging. This would set the tone for the operating environment, which potentially would ask their suppliers to benchmark against. Having said those, having looking into those ESG performance of the e-commerce platform, the question is, how does those performance of postal potential clients, i.e. e-commerce platforms, would actually be translated into the e-commerce and the supplier relationship? Then we look at it is 67% of the entities have a supplier codes of conduct. And of course, there are many different dimensions of supplier code of conduct. We look at the enforcement level in terms of how do e-commerce platforms play entities enforce their ESG sustainable ESG code of conduct for the suppliers. Then we would see that there is an active close to 50% of entities actually conduct a supplier assessment process. It can take place through desk research, but it can also desk assessment through systematic evidence-based system. It can also be through third-party on-site verification process and assessment process. And once they are inconsistency captured, there are also measures relating to corrective actions. Having said that, the data shows that in terms of imposing the ESG supplier conducts, the implementation really vary because the question is whether in terms of enforcement, whether it entails, if it is captured, for example, inconsistency is captured, whether this entails a supplier contract exclusion. The answer is not that high. And whether the minimum ESG standard performance would be meaning that associated with contract award, this is not high, very high either. Having said that, it can be relating to the current capacity level of a police and implement the ESG codes of conduct of a platform. Because from what we have seen, for example, they are over 10% of due regular review of the procurement. And there are some training program for internal buyers to actually be understanding the corporate level of supplier ESG codes of conduct in order for them to perform in the assessment and police process. Having said that, it also means in terms of a detailed operational level, in terms of operational standard, it's still not very straightforward. Instead, we see that a lot of platforms actually pursue and prefer more development process to actually support, to provide a supporting environment for suppliers to be part of this codes of conduct alignment process. We can see that there are also information training or technical assistance programs taking place. Overall, the supplier development process in place and public available are over 30%. And having said that, this data basically shows how at the individual entity level we could expect in terms of the ESG performance and supply chain management. And this comes to the end of my presentation. I want to give a very quick key message here. I hope from this presentation, it gives you an idea whether the sustainability is relevant to Postal Network or not. The answer is yes, and it's not a side issue. It is really about market access, about investment, and also about the postal modernization goals. Here, I finished my presentation and happy to receive any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Yashwan, for that really insightful and detailed presentation and taking us through the policy regulatory drivers, driving ESG and capital markets, and insight into the S&P Global as well. At this point, we will open the floor to questions from the chat. If anything has come into your mind that you'd like Yashwan to clarify at this point, we can take one or two. Please feel free to type it in the chat. I believe, Yashwan, any links to additional resources can be shared after the presentation.
Sure. Yeah. And also, Lisa, if I just want to double check, if colleagues want to raise a hand, they have the capacity to do it as well, right?
Yes. If you feel more comfortable, perhaps to ask with unmuting your mic, please do use the raise hand function. We'll also have an open Q&A session where you'll be able to do that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there we go. We have a question from Tim Walsh. Are any posts captured in the S&P index?
Yes, first I can answer. Yeah, the answer is yes. And then actually when you go to the, I'm still in the sharing mode. If you go to my previous slide, sorry, here, there is a barcode you can scan, and then you actually be able to check any post that is already captured in the scope of a S&P ESG the score analysis. It's just like for this presentation, our focus for now is to look at the operating environment of e-commerce. So I put more the figure relating to e-commerce platform for now.
I think we can't see your screen. Yashwan is sharing it.
Oh,
I took over and shared
okay,
the main slides, but we'll send the presentation here in the chat, and then people will be able to access it.
Great, fantastic. Thank you so much. We have another question. Do UPU plan to bring S&P CSA score to be the postal assessment standard?
My answer is this is subject to the guidance of member countries. If there is a strong interest, and we will follow member countries' guide on this one.
Great. Thank you so much, Yashwan. I think at this point, we are running a bit over time, so we'll move to our next presentation. Please, everybody, do feel free to continue typing in your questions. But before we go to Dr. Janya's presentation, we'd like to ask you another question. And you'll see it on your screen right now. And we'll give you a few minutes to answer the question, which is your organization currently required by e-commerce clients to meet any of the following sustainability standards? Okay, so from the responses we can see here, most of you have said GHG emission reporting or disclosure, followed closely by use of electric or low emission vehicles, and supplier code of conduct, and tying closely with the use of recyclable and reduced packaging. Thank you so much for that, everybody. And this will take us well into our next presentation from Dr. Janya. Dr. Janya, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lisa, and good afternoon to everybody. First of all, I'd like to thank you very much for UPU and UNITAR to have me joining for this webinar. And for my presentation, I will sharing from the postal and the service provider perspective, which is following by Yashun's presentation that is reflecting what e-commerce is requesting or demanding from the customer side, regulatory, and also market capital. And so this is actually, it's quite aligned with the poll that what we're observing from the postal and logistic service provider at the moment is the growing role of sustainability. And the key sustainability trend in postal sector actually is also influencing from the customer demand, and that is the majority is from the e-commerce and also for the customer requirement, and partly is also from the regulatory as well. So what we're observing that the key sustainability trend is including first is carbon emission. And this is really aligning to the poll, and the answer is approximately 50%. To be exact, is 48% that is getting more customer requests on the carbon emission reduction. And this is also including the emission disclosure and data sharing. And why this is important? Because of the customer, actually for the service provider and the logistic provider, we are transportation, and actually we are scope 3 of the customer. And that means that if they are disclosing the emission report for the whole supply chain, they need part of the scope 3 emission. And they also have to make sure that what we calculating and what we measure is also aligned with the methodology that they are calculating. And that is the reason that some customer, they are also requiring for the postal and logistic provider to disclose the emissions calculation methodology, and including the data sharing, what the primary data that we are collecting, and just want to make sure that it transparency and aligning with their calculation. And apart from that, apart from the carbon emission reduction, it also including clean transport and green infrastructure across the supply chain. And this is including the request for the adoption of the electric vehicles and also utilization of the renewable energies. And another trend that is also very important is the sustainable last mile delivery, because we know that for the postal and logistic, especially from e-commerce, the carbon intensity is very heavy on the last mile delivery. And the last mile delivery is not only for environmental dimension only. This is very well linked to the urban and also some of the urban planning and sustainability, which is including the traffic congestions, air pollutions, and also noise in the city as well. And that is why it's also for the postal and logistic provider, we can contributing to reducing the impact of the last mile delivery as well. Recycle and reuse of packaging material. This is also very important. And this is very much aligned from Yashun's presentation that for the e-commerce is really generating a very high volume of the plastic and package for waste. And this will bring to the optimum packaging design. So basically, apart from the recycle and reuse, for the postal and also for the logistics service provider, now they are more in terms of working to optimum the packaging design. And this is to reducing cost and also at the same time, the emission reduction impact as well. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so from that, the previous slide, I did sharing some insight about the sustainability trend. And now we can also observing that how the e-commerce platform is enforcing for us as a logistics service provider to enhancing sustainability. And that what we observe is the procurement mechanism, that they are utilizing the procurement mechanism to enhance the sustainability. And we can see that from the initial level, most of the procurement is starting to request for the company to have the sustainability course or even disclosing, reporting the emission report. And that is including some of the emission reduction targets, transportation or transport reporting on carbon footprint and environmental impact. And some companies is also requesting to have the compliance that has a specific environmental standards. For example, that it has to comply with the SBTi, or this is a specific ISO that is relating to transportation. And from a certain initial level of the procurement that enhancing sustainability, apart from the clause or some of the emission report, some company, they are also requesting for the company to have and also proving that they have the roadmaps. And this is increasing the certain level of the sustainability practice from the postal and also the logistics service provider companies. Because actually, when you're going to have the roadmap, it means that it also have to align with the company vision and mission. And this is including the established sustainability strategy and roadmap, and net zero emission pathway, and transparent emission data and goals. So one step from roadmap, so we also observe that some e-commerce or some company are requesting a certain action from the postal and logistics service provider. And this means that it's not only just intention to have the action for the climate action, but you really have to have the action in place, and you have to practice this in your organization. And that is including some adoption of the eco-friendly technologies or practice. And, you know, some of the company also request to have the environmental disclosure and data sharing. And also this is getting more and more that the customer is requesting for the company to providing low carbon service option in addition to the basic option. For example, that in the past, for e-commerce companies, so basically when they are offer the service to the customer, they have the standard delivery options. They are going to have the express options, and they might have the same day delivery service. But currently and in the future, we also have to providing the green option as well, or low emissions transportation options. And this is going to be the new market standards. It's not new anymore. And we can see that, you know, the market is shifting to have the green options. And this is for attracting for new consumer, and also just to make sure that this is open up for new business. And this new market standard is going to be the new KPI of the selection criteria of the supplier selection. Okay, so yeah, so from this we can see that there are okay, so I'm going to answer the question probably later after finish my presentation. Is that okay? Okay, so with this trend that we are observing to get more demand and the requirement from the customer, it also supporting by one of the study from Smart Freight Center and Implement Consulting Group that they did a survey in Europe for company that is including transportation, and this is cover pretty much all the sector of the shipper and buyer, which is also including e-commerce platform and post and parcel service as well. They are asking that what are specific requirements that you are going to add and embed to your procurement contract in the future to addressing the sustainability. Okay, so this can be grouped by two requirements. So the first one is about emission reporting requirement. And then the second is about emission performance requirement. And you can see the scale and then the shade as well, that the first group, which is in the reddish shade, that is imply for that the company have to going to add some emission report requirement, which is starting from one which is quite easy, which is the lighter shade, that you have to have a certain dedicated human resource for decarbonization. Okay, and it step up to be requires the customer or supplier to measure carbon emission, and then this is going to have more requirement to have some of the decarbonization roadmap. And then if you can look at on the darker shade, this is more in terms of the actions in practice. So rather on the red shade is more roadmap, is more is plan and the company's vision, how they intended to address on the sustainability and climate action. But then the requirement is also going more intense, and then request for the action in practice that the company have to also have the emission reduction initiative, and up to like a supplier also have to comply with the low emission specification. And this is what is very important on number 7 that I did mention, that more customer is required, that it requires the options of the green options. And this is a part in addition to the basic option in tender. So it means that if you are not have the sustainability or green transport action, you are not able to providing alternative service to your customer, and it tend to lose your customer if you are not really getting into this kind of the new business potential. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so there are also a lot of kind of questions asking and then debating about going to be green and then investing in sustainability. It actually is requiring some of the investment as well. So but it is clear that the market is shifting towards sustainability. So in part of the company, what we really have to do and understand is we also have to trading off and then balancing for the immediate cost versus long-term benefit. And this is it come to 3 financial implication that we also have to understand when we are evaluating the business case, that the capital investment in green infrastructure. So actually this can be offset by long-term saving in energy, fuel and operating costs. And also their potential to access to new business, because sustainability is become a key procurement requirement. And this, you have a potential to attract to a new partnership, a new customer. So if you are not able to comply to this new requirement, you might be get rid of the market. and this is a business potential that we also have to take this in mind as well. And very importantly, the risk mitigation, because the regulatory shift, even though that now is still voluntary for transportation in terms of GHG emission disclosing and also the report, but it is shifting quite clear that from voluntary it will become mandatory very soon. So the adoption in green practice or climate action, this is to avoid the future carbon pricing or any other penalty that might apply in the future. So with this, we also have to understanding these 3 financial implications, and also in the same time, we have to make sure that this investment, it have to integrate it into the company operational plan, and this to drive both environmental and financial performance. And this is how to do it. For example, that the cost of implementing green infrastructure, it have to align with your company's operational strategic planning. For example, this is a very clear example that I think it is quite clear that how we are expecting and utilizing the investment that we put in green infrastructure. I give you an example of the solar power facility or the electric vehicle, because these two are probably, we can see a lot of investment in solar power and then electric vehicle in this industry in terms of the logistic. So if the company is invest to have the solar power facility, and this is actually is not only for warehouse and for building, we can also utilizing this and align with the green transportation as well, because the solar power facility can also be the charging station, and it can also creating the clean energy for the electric vehicle as well. And also at the same time, as this is a very advantage of the postal service that in most of the company, it has the facility across the country. And once we are investing in this green infrastructure, we can also utilizing it and then taking this to be the asset that we may able to open up for the new business model in the future as well. And then is followed by potential saving of the fuel, energy, and maintenance in the long run. And very importantly, this is potential for the new customer, and it can be a future proof of this investment in terms of regulatory trends and also consumer demand as well. Right, next slide, please. Okay, so I'm running a little bit late in time. So when we talk about the investment, we also see some subsidies and incentive program from e-commerce platform as well that it might impact to price and service design. So some incentive program that we have at the moment, and we can see that this already, implementing in some countries, especially like in Thailand as well. There are green loan partnership with the financial institution, and this is for electric vehicle that some of the company, they also have, partner with financial institution. And this is also in terms of the logistic service provider as well, that they may have some carrier that may need subsidies to transition to the green energies and then electric vehicles. And sometimes it will come as the co-funding for electric vehicles and energy efficiency investment as well. So for this, I like to take a little bit of time to introduce the carbon insetting program, because logistic infrastructure and then green infrastructure, it really require a lot of investment. So sometimes, with incentive is not sufficient. There are concept and there are, kind of discussion and approach for carbon insetting program. To be in this logistic and transportation sector, because most of the companies, sometimes if they want to reduce the emissions, they are going to offsetting this, and this is going beyond their own kind of sector. So why we are not bringing that investment to use in our sector, and this to accelerate the decarbonization, and this also relating to some practice mechanism that we already see in the market, which is book and claim. And this is, I think it's already quite a couple of years already that book and claim has been implemented in, especially for air freight, and this is to supporting, the growing of the sustainable aviation field. Okay, next slide, please. Right, so this is we can see that why carbon insetting is one of the mechanisms that is quite important. We'll see that most of the investment is going to forestry or some other sector, but it's very minimal that it coming to transport and logistics. So the idea is why we are not investing in our company. So basically, this is, it might be the message to our customer and, the buyer who are using and then be a customer of freight and transport. And this is the information from freight transport, but I think some of this implication can apply to the postal and then the logistics service provider, which is the post and parcel sector as well. Okay, so I will conclude my presentation on the next slide with some final remark that I'm going to support Yashuan's statement as well, that sustainability is no longer optional. It is a strategic necessity, and it will give you the opportunity to lead the market. And also it will providing with the financial and environmental benefit, and importantly is future-proofing. Okay, thank you very much, and apologies for running out of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Janya, for that. I think that was really, really insightful. We have one question maybe that we can take before we move on to the next presentation really quickly. From Margot, who is asking, what do you mean by low carbon service options?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And this, when I mentioned about low carbon service option, I take this as an example which is very clear. So normally with e-commerce, for the customer, they will have the option as standard options, and that might take 3 days. When they deliver your parcel to your home, and then they have the express options for you to choose. And currently we are going to see the green options, which this might take longer time, but definitely it is producing less emission. So these options will reflecting to the service design for the operation. For example, that it might take, a different mode of transportation. It also have some consolidate with other products, which is some of these options is producing less emission impacts for for the environmental. And some customer, they are very concerned, and they also have to make sure that they don't want that to be harm to the environmental and the planet. And this is also relating to some of the recycled packaging as well, because the low carbon options, my packaging is from all 100% recycled packaging, and sometimes it's also without some wrapping or additional use of the packaging and plastic as well. Okay, I hope that this answers your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Janya. I think that was very clear. And yeah, I think that leaves us in a well position to move to our next presentation. But just to check in with everybody, we have another poll. Please, Lucas, there we go. You'll see it on your screen. Before we move on, we'd like to hear from you once again, and also just to see if you're still with us. The question you'll see is, what should be the priority for regulators in supporting fair and effective sustainability in e-commerce logistics? Great, thank you all for your responses. from here we can see the priority that you're most agreeing with is creating incentives for greener delivery and or logistics practices, and aligning sustainability efforts with national climate goals. Right, I think this is a great point to hand over to Betul Yilmaz, who will give us the regulatory perspective. Over to you, Betul.
Thank you, Lisa, for giving me the floor. Good afternoon, everyone. So I am Betul Yilmaz. I work at BTK, Information and Communication Technology Authority. But before I start, I would like to be sure that you can clearly hear me, right? So you don't. Okay, perfect. So as a BTK, I work in the sectoral competition department, and I first would like to briefly introduce the BTK work and then talk about the regulation in that. So the Turkey National Authority for Telecommunication and Postal Services, we regulate the market access, competition and service quality. By the way, you can also please pass the next slide. So the e-commerce platforms, as you know, increasingly dominate logistic and delivery, and also the environmental sustainability rises on the agenda. And that's the reason BTK's role is evolving. With the passing of the new Turkey's climate law, there is now both an opportunity and responsibility for BTK to help shape how platform standards develop in an inclusive and transparent and environmentally aligned way. That said, to strengthen environmental sustainability in postal sector and enact the necessary regulations, BTK issued the regulation amending the Postal Sector Authorization Regulation, which was published in the beginning of 2025. And with these amendments, a major step forward in environmental sustainability by requiring postal operators to comply with international recognized environmental standards. So now our postal operators must submit annual reports to the authority detailing the measures they have taken on energy efficiency, waste management, carbon emission reduction, and mitigation of environmental impacts. So we can say that now we are confident this initiative will accelerate the postal sector's sustainable transformation and deepen its commitment to environmental sustainability. So next slide, please. While e-commerce platforms had already begun voluntarily setting their own sustainability targets and also published the ESG reports, we are now see that the emergence of formal national sustainability framework that aim to bring structured transparency and alignment across the entire ecosystem. So one of the most important steps is the introduction of TCRS, the Turkey Sustainability Reporting Standard, that developed by the Public Oversight Authority, and this is in line with the global framework CSRD. And this reporting will require large companies, and we expect that possibly logistic providers over time, so to disclose their environmental and climate-related performance. And these represent a shift from voluntary initiatives to regulated transparency. So that's why regulators' role is very critical to ensure these reporting expectations are applied, and it also don't exclude smaller operators and are aligned across public and also private sectors. So next slide, please. And here I also would like to talk general in e-commerce law. So the previous law of 6563 was inefficient to address the problems that created in the face of this latest digitalization and technology. So that is the reason, influenced by EU's Digital Market Act and Digital Service Act, this amendment law was published in 2022. And this law redefined key concepts and expand the regulatory authority of the Ministry of Commerce. And this amendment law introduced a regulatory framework based on the scale of e-commerce actors. So for larger actors, the law introduced very strict obligations, including restrictions of self-preferencing, limitations on exclusive practices, and enhanced compliance requirements. So this amendment law also has indirect implications for BTK due to the evolving structure of the e-commerce ecosystem. One important point I would like to highlight here is e-commerce companies such as Trendyol and Hepsiburada have established their own vertically integrated companies, which is Trendyol Express and Hepsijet. And they operate as a postal service providers licensed by BTK. So as a result, although the amendment law primarily targets e-commerce platform activities, we can say the obligations imposed on e-commerce platforms indirectly affect BTK's regulatory domain through their logistic operations. And the rapid growth of e-commerce platforms offering integrated delivery services has significantly transformed the postal sector in Turkey. So also maybe we can mention here that these practices have some negatively impact non-integrated independent postal service providers, especially those are not vertically aligned with the platform itself. Such developments raise concerns regarding market fairness, transparency, and equal access. So that maybe they need to reinforce for coordinated oversight between BTK and Ministry of Trade in address these possible impact. On the other hand, the newly established law, they also introduced a carbon market board that where there is a coordination between other authorities. So this structure presents an opportunity for us to maybe lose these gaps between sectoral regulators such as BTK and other governance issues. So next slide, please. In this slide, I would like to briefly talk about some initiatives taken by these e-commerce platform, the Trendyol and Hepsiburada. So they launched some sustainability initiatives before the regulation came out. So we can say here that these examples are platform-led examples, not regulatory-driven examples. So they have the route optimization standards for the Trendyol Go, which is the food delivery platform of Trendyol, and they have the package cargo package produced by recycled materials. So next slide, please. And here also we can see some examples from Hepsiburada that they have multi-vehicle route optimization technology, and also they increase the recycled materials in also their recycled bags up to 30%. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned about the postal operators already, this parcel lockers is very good example for the sustainability solution. So I would like to share this data with you that Trendyol Express is the leading right now, the leader of the parcel lockers, and they have the 1,833 already. And Aras Kargo is following it with almost 1,400. Next slide, please. And here we have can you also click one more time? Pick up and drop off points. So here we can say that these are the retail delivery points, exclude parcel lockers. So then again, Trendyol Express has the highest number here, that almost 6,000 by the end of 2024. Next slide, please. We can talk here about some risks. So what are the risks that companies can face? And we can say the entry barriers for small operators, lack of financial resources, and lack of technological maturity. But as mentioned earlier, the growing influence of e-commerce platforms on the logistics sector also present a potential risk. So the sustainability measures introduced by these dominant players may become industry norms, and it might create pressure on the rest of the sector to comply. with. So this dynamic raises concerns about, again, fair competition, especially for smaller logistic providers that may lack the resource to quickly adapt to platform-defined environmental standards. Next slide, please. So now let me turn on to international example that I believe that offers a valuable perspective. So here I would like to talk about the UPU, IB and BTK pilot project with an aim to set up an example of removing policy barriers and designing incentive measures in order to enable scaling up green deliveries. And the overall objective of this project is to collaborate with stakeholders and in the postal market to identify the necessary policy arrangements. And this project also can be considered as an example that can be the same way for similar initiatives in other countries by aiming to encourage policy formulation. So in conclusion, taking part in this international project is a very important step for BTK and achieving environmental sustainability goals. So another example, next slide, please. This is also a very good example that I really would like to add it into my presentation, because many countries can be inspired by this example. That recently Belgium became the first country in Europe that they introduced a law requiring e-commerce businesses to provide at least 2 delivery options, one of which must be a more sustainable alternative, such as parcel locker or pickup points. So what's important to highlight here that this is not just a symbolic move. It has already led to a 30% reduction in CO2 emissions and has helped solve traffic congestions in urban areas. In short, this is a great example of smart targeted regulation. And this kind of approach could offer inspiration for us, for policymakers, especially as we consider how to balance platform-driven innovation with the public goals. Next slide, please. So my final slide, I would like to say that the key message and what is the next step for us. So as you understand clearly from my presentation, BTK is not the primary authority on environmental regulation, especially on e-commerce platforms, but it holds a unique position at the intersection of digital infrastructure, postal services, and platform governance. So as e-commerce platforms increasingly operate their own logistic arms, BTK should ensure that market access remains fair and that smaller postal providers are not disadvantaged by these private ECG requirements. And BTK also can play a valuable role in supporting this data transparency and enabling these smaller operators to adopt these reporting sustainability obligations like TCRS. And also BTK should be part of this cross ministerial coordination mechanism, helping align platform practices with these goals while also maintaining open and competitive postal markets. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Betül, for that presentation from the example of Turkey. I think that was super insightful, and experience sharing, I think, is key. So thank you so much for that. Without much further ado, I'll see if there are any questions in the chat for Betül. I don't see any, but I do see a hand raised. And I think maybe as you ponder on all the presentations and let it marinate a little bit, I'm sure there may be a couple of questions that come up. But we do have an open Q&A session right now. And I think this is a good opportunity for you to engage with the experts from any of the presentations that have been shared today. Please feel free to ask any question. If even you have a comment, I think this is the time. I think we can take the next 13 minutes-ish to go have some exchange. If you feel like typing in the chat your question, please do so. If you want to ask it live, you can use the raise hand function, and then we'll be able to hear you on the floor. So I do see a hand raised from Margot. I think we can allow her to speak, Lucas, and then...
Yes, I'm allowed to speak, thanks.
Okay, great. Off you go, Margot.
Great. So thanks for all the presentations. I just have a comment for the last presentation from Betul, because you mentioned a lot out-of-home delivery and parcel lockers as being more environmental friendly. And from La Poste perspective in France, just wanted to nuance that a bit. Because actually we have conducted studies with 2 universities. And this study shows that the environmental performance of out-of-home delivery is, in the majority of the case, is not more sustainable than home delivery, because you have to take into consideration also the consumer's journey to the parcel locker, which obviously adds CO2 emissions to the overall journey of the parcel. So yes, just wanted to bring that into the reflection to nuance that a bit, that these studies made by universities show that in the majority of the cases, out-of-home delivery is less environmental friendly than home delivery. Out-of-home delivery is more performant from an environmental perspective in very dense areas. If the customer takes the bus, or if he or she walks to the parcel lockers, but in the vast majority of the cases, home delivery, where there is a mutualization of the parcel delivery done by parcel operators, which have generally more electric vehicles than the individuals, is more environmental friendly than out-of-home delivery. So that was just a comment I said to bring into the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Margot. I'll also hand over to Yashwan, who will moderate for us this open Q&A session. Over to you, Yashwan, and then I guess Betul can also respond if she would like to. Over to you.
Thank you, Lisa. And also thank you, Margot, for raising this question. I think starting from both Dr. Jayan and then Betul's presentation, the question is what kind of delivery option is a low carbon or green delivery has repeatedly come into the discussion. We do observe the trend that additional option is needed, but whether it should be by particular operation or by performance. And now it seems that neither a platform or regulatory space have a clear answer yet. This is just like my limited and humble observation for that. That means there is a exploration space and time for both market players and also the regulatory space to reflect on A, the data, and B, also the stakeholder engagement result. So this is my quick reflection on the comments coming from Margot. But I think this question actually, again, this additional information and data supporting information and gives a good food for thought for both speakers and all audience on site. But let me just also turn back to maybe Betul first and then followed by Dr. Jayan to see whether you have any reflection on this comment. Thank you.
May I start if it's okay? Okay, good. So thank you, Margot, for this. This is a comment and very good comment. So as I am also co-chairing ERGP Sustainability Working Group, and you can find our report online that we have mentioned many years ago, where Poland has the highest number of parcel lockers before. So there are, as you said, different arguments about if parcel lockers as an out-of-home delivery is quite the option for the sustainability, environmental sustainability. But as the country like us, we started newly with this implementation from postal operators, and of course with the parcel lockers, they have electrical vehicles and other implementation. But we consider that if the parcel lockers number start to increase, we can have more environmental sustainability solutions in the future about this. Because, for example, from my point of view, instead of having each product delivered to the home, now just across the authority, I have the parcel lockers that many operators can bring their shipments on that, and I can go by walk and to receive it. But as you said, it's important if the customer going by foot or by car, so it affects the CO2 still. So very good point from your side. Thank you very much. And it is an, I think, long-term argument that we will discuss in the future also.
Thank you, Batu. And now Dr. Jayan, please.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think perhaps I can sharing from the case that we did with Thailand Post, and also for some of my research work as well. And this is when we talk about alternative options, locker, and something like this is one of the solution. But when we are going to decide what is the best option, is also depend on the country. I mean, with the traffic landscape as well, and also we also have to make sure about the infrastructure. So, for example, that with the locker in Thailand is actually it is not a good option, because when we comparing about delivery at home and locker is not pretty much how to say it's not much different in terms of the greenhouse gas emissions, but for the solution that we are working is we also have to trying to find the place as the hub for the collection. For example, that Thailand Post also partner with university to be the hub rather than several lockers in the public place, because university is the place that most of the students they are working as well. So we also have to be very careful that the way of the short, collecting the parcel is by walk or by bicycle rather than by car, which is going to creating more carbon emission. So that is my reflection on the locker. It depends on the service design. And I like to share, if I have time, and another example as well that we conduct. One of the service design that we are going to address we are planning to address for the low emission option in Thailand is to switch mode to rail rather than directly going by truck. But then the result of the study is also not as what we thought, that the emission is not reduced significantly. The thing is, because our infrastructure is not ready yet, we still have to have the short delivery from the railway to the post office as well. So that is actually, there's no straightforward, kind of the options and then the solution. It also depends on infrastructure of the countries, and also it depends on the service design that we are expecting. Okay, so that might be my answer.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jayan. And I was also monitoring very closely the chat room. For now, we do not have further hands raised for question, but all colleagues that provide comments indicate it has been very informative. But again, this is small, like one question Q&A, we have already seen the diversity in terms of service design and different direction. In a lucky way to say that we are in a space that everyone is faster innovate and then have a close collaboration relationship from different dimensions of the stakeholders. And in this way, building on this discussion, as mentioned in the event flyer, actually we would potentially be able to engage further stakeholders and further events like this nature to address even more technical grounding details. So they help everyone to say, okay, what is the best solution that fits your particular regulatory, capital, and operational environment. I know that we have we do not see further hands up, and maybe we can proceed to the concluding stage. And let me hand over to Lisa very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Yashwan, and thank you to the experts as well for that informative session. At this point, we do thank you for your time, but before we wrap up, we'd like to ask you to take our final poll of the day. Our final poll of the day, and arguably a very important, or the most important one of today. What kind of support would most help your organization align with the sustainability expectations of the e-commerce market? So based on all the presentations, what kind of support would be most helpful for your organization? Give a few minutes for people to share their feedback. And if your kind of support is not listed here, please type it in the chat so that we can capture that as well. I see we have 17 answers. If we can get a few more, that would be great before we close the poll. Meanwhile, maybe we can see what the responses are right now. So, majority of you have said that you would like technical training or knowledge sharing. So something maybe similar to this webinar series. Access to financing for clean infrastructure is also another popular one. 10 of you have said you'd like that support. Partnership opportunities with platforms as well. I think that was really insightful to hear from Betul on Turkey's experience and the partnerships that they've built, as well as Dr. Jaya. Tools, data tools to measure and report emissions, and also clearer national regulations or policy guidance. If there's anything else you want to share on the support you would like, please do type it in the chat. But for now, I think we can close that poll. Thank you so much for your active engagement in the polls and in the sessions and the Q&A. We really appreciate it. I've learned a lot. I found it super informative, especially the presentations. And I thank you all so much for being very engaging. I have learned a lot with regards to how postal services can respond to the e-commerce ecosystem, sustainability, criteria and requirements, and how the market is shifting to having more greener options for e-commerce and how postal services can respond to that. But for a more detailed summary of the key takeaways, I'll hand over to Yashwan, who can give us a perspective from UPU, sorry. Yes.
No
Over to you.
problem, Lisa. Thank you so much. And also thank you a lot, colleagues, for the participation. I think the last report has been really informative to guide on what work needs to be done. And in this context, I would like to abuse a bit my speaker's role. And Lucas, can you actually move further to some backup slide? And indeed, in response to the potential need and support, we are actually blending such need into the Dubai business strategy. Next slide, please. I'm listing a few work item proposals with immediate relevance to what the colleagues has mentioned, so that IB potentially can develop a program to support the market access, finance, and clean technology. Of course, next slide, please. This is subject to member countries' guidance and support. At the IB level, we stay committed to serve the needs of our member countries. And I think this is actually a nice concluding taking away message is our support and activities in this nature will continue, not only right now, but also going forward. And I hope colleagues enjoy the session and also be able to contribute, participate more in the next ones as we design further. Then I hand over back to Lisa to the final concluding and thank you message. Thank you.
Thank you, Yashwan. I think that was perfect. I won't add more to that. Just to note for everybody that there will be a third webinar session, and details of this will be shared in due course, and we hope that you can join us in that third session. If it's anything like this, I'd really plan to be there. So thank you so much to our experts, Dr. Janya and Betul. Thank you so much to Yashwan, the UPU team, and the UNITAR team as well, Lucas and Joe. Thank you so much for all the support. And importantly, to all of you who've joined us today from wherever you are, thank you so much for your time. Please do take care and have a good day or night. Goodbye and see you next time.
Thank you so much.